a gentleman came in here and he looked at this painting behind you. He said, "Junk from the street." And I said to him, "You're right."
Joining me today, very excited to have the New York City-based artist, Mark Wiener. Mark, welcome.
Pleasure. Welcome to my studio.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
But we finally got this interview together. We've been going back and forth in summer schedules. And in any event, here we are, your great studio. Last time I was in, I said, man, I got to do a sit down with you. And between that time and this interview, we've had some good ink.
Yeah, a little bit.
Tell me about you and how you've been informed as an artist, your early childhood. What's your earliest artistic childhood memory?
Well, there are various levels of talking about that, because I grew up in a family where we were involved with the arts. But involved with the arts, not the arts we know today, but the arts of like Marc Chagall, and Calder, and Miro, and Dali, and so on and so on. So the artists were different. There was a little more style about them. As wacky as they were, as wacky as we are, they taught me a more conservative approach to painting and to being around the art world.
And how did you come by? Were your parents both painters? Were they just were they art critics, art lovers? Art
lovers. My mother had an art program at the United Nations for fundraising. So that's how we met Dali and so on and so on and so on.
So it's one thing to see the paintings, it's another thing to actually meet the artists.
It was more important to meet the artists.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my favorite stories, when I met Dali at the St. Regis Hotel, I was 14. And in front of me was a Maxfield Parrish painting. And recently, I don't know where we were, and we were looking at some Maxfield Parrish photographs. And I was thinking about the experience. The whole time I was with Dali, I never looked at him. I only looked at the Maxfield Parrish. That's all my interest was. So, the different things that happened.
Did you realize that he was an icon? I mean, in those days, he was like a rock and roll star, too.
Oh, I most definitely realized, because I was there to help. He had to sign 1,000 lithographs. So he gave us 15 minutes.
Right.
So I was the guy throwing the lithographs in front of him. His captain was the one pulling them out.
Right.
So it was one of those experiences.
Right, terrific.
Great, he definitely was a rock star then.
Great story. How about educationally? Did you have a mentor when you were in art school?
Well, I studied photography.
Okay.
I had a number of mentors. My mentors came out of the Brodovich School. So it was all Bauhaus. My education was commercial.
Right.
I was at Philadelphia College of Art.
Right.
So...
Wasn't Lynch at the same school? David Lynch?
Yes, yeah. David Lynch was at the same school.
Same time period or a few years before?
A different time.
Yeah.
A different time. But what was interesting was that my mentors weren't the photography teachers. I had Ray Metzger,
wow,
who was a brilliant teacher.
Yeah.
I had Peter Rose as a film teacher. I had Lou Jacobs, I was actually trained as a filmmaker. And I couldn't stay in the business in '83. I just kind of said, I got to go back to painting. And what had happened was I had done some portraits of a gentleman by the name of Frank Zachary, who was editor-in-chief of Town and Country. So he was part of the Amagassett crew,
right, of
Rauschenberg and de Kooning, of all those people.
Yeah.
So through that gentleman, I was brought into the fine art world.
That's pretty heady company.
It was pretty cool,
yeah,
and I was like kind of blasé about it, because yeah, I know who these people were,
right,
but it didn't have the meaning it has for me today. That's
right,
for sure.
Do you remember any specific advice from any of them, being around them? Would you hear snippets of conversation, go, wow?
To be truthfully and honestly dedicated to what you do. Right. And now, don't bullshit, because right, the art world's full of bullshit, and everybody can read what you're doing.
Right.
So he just said, be very straightforward and do what you want to do, and either they'll like it or they won't like it.
Yes, exactly.
This is the bottom line.
When did you make the transition, or what was that moment, the synapse in time where you said, forget photography, I'm going to get into painting, I'm going to get into, and was it abstract expressionism out of the gate? Was it, was there a different style you gravitated towards and then developed into your current style?
Well, my influences, if I were to have a mentor, he wasn't very close, but I knew him well, was Irving Penn.
Sure.
So the style is, everything I do is still life.
Right.
It's all object-oriented. Now,
Right.
when you say object-oriented in the computer world, it has multiple meanings. I learned from watching Mr. Penn photograph how to tell a narrative with objects spontaneously.
Right.
And that's what these paintings are all about. So when I made the transition, when I quit taking pictures, Mr. Penn wouldn't talk to me anymore.
Really?
Yeah, he was really annoyed at me. and then over the years, I guess he saw my paintings, but we didn't stay friends.
Do you build still lifes and then paint, or are you already framing those images in your brain and then attacking the canvas?
Well, if you look at the paintings, they're, especially the one behind us, they're all objects that are used for printing.
Right.
So therefore, I take the objects, I throw them in pigment, and then I throw them out on the surface.
Right.
So the structure of the still life comes from that.
Nice. And when you're working, are you a single canvas artist, or do you like to have multiple canvases going? Creating series, or are you both?
It changes every time.
Yeah.
Like the one behind us, when I did this, I had 4 other canvases running.
Right.
But this was done on the floor,
Right.
the one behind us.
And do you find, do you find that there are limitations in New York with the amount of space you don't have, or can you work in a small environment?
Well, it's like our new studio. We're moving.
Sadly, this great space that I helped build so many years ago is going to be converted into a Highline spectacle.
Well, whichever. But anyway, so we have to leave in 30 days. So the new space has all the same measurements. It's larger, right? But I wonder whether I can do my big canvases in it.
If it's going to have the ceiling height,
it
has
all those things. It's a matter of the feeling.
Right.
But you don't know till you do it.
Do you have nat lighting?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful what we have.
So maybe you'll be creating a different
motif
off of that environment.
Well, sometimes I do this weird thing, as I say. I commit myself to something publicly. Like I said, I would paint for black and white for 10 years.
Right.
I have 3 more years to go.
Right.
I committed myself to 8 of these large canvases.
Right.
So this year, I have to finish 8 large canvases. It's just the way I am. So if I have to find another place to do it or go do them outside, I have no idea.
Right. Well, there you go. And why did you start initially in black and white and not color?
Well, actually, I started in color, all in primary colors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm colorblind, but I'm not really. I'm just color ignorant, as they say. When you're young, they say, "Oh, you're colorblind." One of those deals.
Right.
The painting style was kind of Inuit style. It looked like Eskimo paintings, all objects.
Right.
I guess in 1998, I stopped for a while. I decided to do whatever, and I came back in 2002, and bright colors again, and then all of a sudden, someone came to me, a mentor, and said, "You have to do something really extreme if you want to reach whatever goals you want to reach." So I said, okay, I know black and white really well. You always go to the things you know the best.
Right.
And I started there, and from things that were gestural, things that were somewhat figurative in the figuration from the gesture, the abstraction, and then I came to what I'm doing now, which I call street markings, by the way.
Street markings.
Street markings, which are basically my reflections of what I walk on every day.
Okay. So it doesn't matter if it's the surface below you, in front of you, above
It has to be the surface below.
Always the surface below you.
Yeah.
All right. So you'll take a photographic memory, or snapshot in your memory rather, and then build off of that?
Kind of.
Or do you actually take a shot with your cell phone or something?
I shoot things with my cell phone, and then I don't look at them.
Okay.
It's the idea, when you film something, you always remember a scene, right, or a glimpse or something peripheral. I always remember a mark. So if I saw something on the street, earlier in the day, I paint my hand and go, oh, and I take and throw the paint, and it will probably look like what I had seen on the street.
Right. Terrific. Terrific. The Cedar Tavern was a big hotbed for, the rock and roll art abstract expressionists back in the day. Do you identify with any of those gentlemen?
All of them.
All of them? Do you
All
have a
of them.
favorite amongst them?
Not really.
Klee, Pollock. But do you feel like they've informed your work in some way?
The spirit of the work.
The spirit of the work, okay.
Yeah, I don't think my work reflects at all what they were doing and what
Right,
they were
of course.
building,
You're your own
but it's
person.
all in the spirit.
Right.
All in the spirit of the work.
Do you feel like, when your mentor said you need to do something big, profound, radical, whatever it may be, is it harder today with more and more artists, more and more gallery spaces, kids coming out of art school today? There seems to be just this mishigas of style, and you see snippets within one work of an artist. You're never really sure if that artist is informed by one aesthetic. Is it tough, do you think? I mean, you came out when the East Village was happening. It was a smaller, more insulated scene.
Right.
You had.
It's virtually impossible.
And don't quit art school, stay in school. I should
Stay
say.
in school.
Stay, become a professor.
But the interesting part of it is, when you're born, you have that individuality.
Right.
So when you start making things, as hard as you try to make it different, you can't make it different unless you are different yourself.
So you feel like either intrinsically you got it or you don't. Either
Exactly.
you're Bob Dylan or you're not.
Most definitely.
Right.
Most definitely.
Right. So how about the artists that you see that, we can all look with envy at great art and see substandard art and say, wow, how did that happen?
Well, substandard, it's a difficult term, substandard art.
Right.
Because everybody has different...
Or not my bag.
Yeah.
Not my scene.
It's a matter of varying levels that you wish to be involved with and you wish to see. So if you see something that isn't at the level you want to be involved with, then you call it substandard.
Right.
Or sometimes, there's tons of fluff and the world loves fluff.
Right.
So some of the most successful art today is work that's very serious and very calculated and very studied, but it's fluff.
Right. This does seem to be a lot of that, and it seems to be not just within the art community, but in the film, the music,
all
everything,
over the place,
proliferation. Yeah. Have we dumbed down culture because people are maybe not being educated to the past masters or looking far enough backwards in time?
I think a lot of the current work is developed based upon process, because the one common ground most people have is they can understand how something is constructed.
Right.
So therefore, what we think is fluff or we think is substandard, if you were to go into the history of how it was made, those collectors are attached to it.
Gotcha.
So it's not the narrative of the story of the painting anymore. It is in many artists, but it's more process.
Let's look at it digitally. Every artist now has the opportunity to wave their own flag in the digital universe. And to say, here I am, here's my work. It may not translate, obviously, digitally for a lot of artists, but I don't have to wait for the gallery to say, Mark, you have my blessings, here's your first show, or here, you're a group show. Has that been a good thing for you? Do you not care about it? Are you an artist that just creates and you say, I'll find my audience through osmosis?
I use it to the best the ability anybody could use it. I find that the fact that I can reach 20, 30,000 people a week, I have no idea who's looking at my site, but that's about kind of where it is. It's not a tremendous number, but it's a good amount of people that look at it. I love the idea that every once in a while one of those people walks up to me on the street and says, by the way, I've been following your work for 20 years.
Fantastic.
So there's that type of thing. I mean, I go back using the internet, 25 years old now or something.
Right.
So I had
back
people.
in the 80s.
Yeah, I'm amazed at people that get in touch.
Fantastic, fantastic. What do you say to the gallery owner who may not know your work? How do you sell yourself? How do you see yourself in that gallery context?
That's a big question.
I know. Not a fair question, but...
No, it's a fair question. Yeah. In today's world, especially upcoming today's world, this opening season, the 7th,
right.
there are, I believe, 100 galleries that are disappearing. It may not be a true number, but this is things that you hear. Okay.
Right.
So if every season 100 small galleries disappear, and maybe a couple of large ones, okay, then where do the artists go?
Right.
I mean, recently I was, Saatchi Online had something called 100 days, 100 curators, 1,000 artists, okay? They selected from 60,000 artists, 1,000 artists. Now I happen to be
one. Is
that
globally?
Globally. Now I happen to be one of them.
Who are the gatekeepers in that?
It was like wild. It's like I read the article in the New York Times and I said, now take that number and make it broader.
Right.
Okay? So you have all these people going to all these wonderful colleges.
Right.
Okay. I don't know how many people graduate from Yale a year or Columbia. I know I've been to the Open Studios at Hunter and there were a couple of thousand artists, a couple of hundred artists up there,
Right.
So we're in it's a numbers game. We have to be so totally aggressive that sometimes it's really fairly obnoxious. At the same time, you have to pull back.
Right.
So as you learn that whole thing, sometimes it happens a couple of ways. Someone walks into an open studio and says, my God, I've never seen anything like that before. And then it's written, and that's how it goes. And then you get another type where someone goes, oh, I'll look at it in 5 years. And they come out, I'll look at it in another 5 years,
right.
so on and so on. So, it's, the internet is the most helpful thing we've ever had.
But then there's also the short attention span. I see a lot of ADHD in today's world with the proliferation of the arts. Yes, there are gatekeepers, and there's still the standard bearers of those gatekeepers, the art forms of the world, and who they deem is worthy of the press, pushing against the bloggers, pushing against the artists themselves as bloggers. So I wonder if something that is loved today will be loved in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. What will push through that giant mass of humanity?
First thing is painting.
Right.
The greatest thing is every time a group of people come out of art school, people say, well, painting is dead. Well, painting will never die.
Right.
It's, I go to the Met every Sunday, and I walk around that museum, and I look and I see paintings from, I sit in a room where there's a Rembrandt and 2 El Grecos.
Right.
Okay, with a little couch, and I kind of take a nap in front of it so I can deal with the whole thing. It's quite a wonderful experience. Right. And then I go to the Bowery the same day and see wonderful things that are stylized, process-oriented, but painting.
Right. So painting, well, we've had wall paintings and now, yes, there's digital painting, but to your point, the permanence of a real painting, even though it is finite to an extent, still resonates with people.
I mean, you have the dialogue like Damien Hirst, whether you like it or not. Okay?
Okay.
Painting.
Right.
Okay? It's actually in process of painting.
Right.
Okay. You have dialogue, you look at Murakami.
Right.
3-dimensional, but then painting.
Right.
Okay? So all these people have decided to hold on to painting, and then you have photography and silver and the idea of tonality.
Right.
So what will last, I believe, are those things with the human, things with texture, and it's always
I think
about
there's
surface.
always an organic component to that.
Exactly.
When you know that molecules in space have actually rendered something.
Exactly.
It's finished.
It's amazing to see the collectors today, the major collectors. What do they collect?
Right.
The core collections, if they have the money, or Rothko, Motherwell, Pollock, Krasner, so on, so
right.
Rauschenberg, Jasper.
Right.
These people that use the really strong, honest aesthetics.
Right.
It is what it is. You can see it. Now the conceptual will tell with time. I had a teacher many years ago, Raphael Ferrer.
Mm.
Now Raffi was known for, the most famous thing was his ice cubes in the Garden of the MoMA. It was ice cubes on straw, and it was about the biosphere and the whole thing.
Right.
What is Raffi doing today? He's a painter, a very successful painter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It all comes back. It all comes back to that human touch, that connection. Mark, how would you describe your work to someone?
Best way to explain that, the other day, a gentleman came in here, and he looked at this painting behind you. He said, "Junk from the street." And I said to him, "You're right." So what are my paintings about? We walk along the street all day long. We don't look at the street. We kick things. We kick people sometimes too. These paintings are about being more aware of the surface that we ignore totally. That's the bottom line.
That's for this series of paintings, though.
That's for this series.
And maybe after you hit the 10-year mark, the next series will launch into a different exploration, different tangent.
But I think they'll still have to do with A, surface, okay, and B, what I have this thing about when I can feel when my feet touch things, the tactileness of your feet on the surface. I mean, I did a series of iPad drawings recently, which are I'm in the middle of transitioning, probably to etchings. And it's the same feel. I'm amazed. It has the same feel of touch.
Fantastic. There you go, the artist embracing the digital embracing the artist. Give and take. Fantastic.
I'll tell you a funny anecdote. It's kind of corny. I'm always a little corny, but we have digital, right? And now we draw with our digits. It's kind of reverse.
We've gone back to childhood
We've
finger
gone
painting.
back to childhood finger
It's so
painting.
true. It's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah. Why not? Mark, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Continued success.
Thank you.
And I look forward to see where your art lands in the next decade.
Well, thank you.
Dusty Wright, Mark Wiener. See you soon.